Networking. Everyone says they hate it, but that's mostly because people don't do it right. Today, we're going to be talking about not networking, but my guest, Michelle Tillis Lederman, who just wrote a fantastic book called The Connector's Advantage, will talk to us today about the connection mindset, how to be a connector and connect with genuine authenticity. So it's not just something you do, but someone you are. And what's great is today's talk is going to be perfect for you, whether you don't think you're very good at connecting with people or nurturing those networks, or you're already kind of see yourself as a master connector who want to up level so that you can achieve even greater benefits for your own health, for your work, and for your relationships. Stay tuned. Welcome to today's episode of Slice of Brilliance. I'm so happy to have you here. Today we are talking about the importance of connections and how to be a good connector, even if you don't think you already are one. I am thrilled to have my friend and colleague, Michelle Tillis Lederman, here with us today. Hello, Michelle. How are you?
I'm great, Maria.
Great. So let me tell you a little bit about Michelle. She is an accomplished speaker, coach, trainer, author. She's written 4 books, and she's the author of a great book that came out how many years ago now? Well, this one just came out, The Connector's Advantage. Push that up. Put that up there.
I don't have the other one in reach. I can go get the other one.
No, that's okay. Her other book was The 11 Laws of Likeability, when Michelle first came into my orbit many years ago through a mutual friend. But like I said, since then, she's written 4 books. She was named by Forbes as one of the top, one of 25 professional networking experts to watch, which is pretty huge. And your career is amazing. You were an NYU professor, a finance executive, a recovering CPA, which I really like. And now you work with organizations and individuals to help them leverage the power of connections and create stronger networks for greater results. And your clients range from government to academia to Fortune 500 companies. A few of the notables in here: Madison Square Garden, Michigan State, Ernst & Young, Sony, and you've been featured on CBS and MSNBC and in the New York Times, Forbes, and Working Mother magazine. We're so happy to have you here, Michelle.
I'm always happy to be with you, Maria.
Speaking of connections, right? That is your whole world. And you and I met through a mutual connection and have been
a mutual connector.
A mutual connector, yes, which we'll get into in this episode. And ironically, this is the power of connections in our world today. Is you and I have been collaborators. You've been my client. You've been a colleague, a referral partner, given me advice, and we've never met in person all of these years. You are on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. So this is just...
I tried. I came out to San Francisco. And
I know. We just couldn't make it happen. But you live your message, which is what I love about the importance of connections, and not just making them, but keeping them and nurturing them and being generous with them. And so many of the networking philosophies that I hold dear are because of you, because of what you've taught me over the years. So, and people say I'm a good networker, so that's testament to you. But let's talk a little bit about the book, The Connector's Advantage. It's 7 mindsets
to grow your influence and impact.
Thank you. And so tell me a little bit about, you've written quite a few books. You've been talking about networking and connections and relationships and using that, in a good way to your business advantage. So what made you write this book, and who is this book for?
This book is for everyone, anyone and everyone who wants to get whatever they're working on, whether it's a job, a promotion, a sale, grow a business, get a referral, get happier, get healthier, like all of it, faster, easier, and better, because that's what the advantage is. When you are a connector, you get those results faster, easier, and better. And why did I write it? For me, it's a natural follow-up to the 11 Laws of Likeability. In that book, I'm talking about what we do before, during, and after a conversation that enables connection, and how likability forms. This book is about who you are as a person. And actually, my brother-in-law walked into my office and asked me, what was the difference between networking and connecting, or networking and a connector, I should say. And
that's a great question. I love that.
And in the acknowledgments, I actually attribute the last line of the book to him, because my answer to his question was like, oh my God, that's it, you know? And I said, networking is something you do. A connector, it's someone you are. And that's where I wanted to take people from, of just kind of like, this is something that you do and here's how you can do it well, to this is a mindset in the way in which we approach life and people and business and everything. And if we can shift to a mindset of a connector and be somebody who is relationship focused, who is prioritizing relationships in their life and understands the value of them and the importance of them, then we don't have to be doing something all the time, because we just are who we are.
I love that. I mean, I love that it's also just a sense of identity for many people. And I think that brings me to, that's a great segue to the next question, because what if you don't identify yourself as a connector? What if you don't feel like you have that skill set, or you're good at it, or however people, you know, people make a lot of, not excuses, but they hide behind a lot of things in terms of why they don't have a strong network or keep up with people. Is that partially the audience you wrote this book for? And B, what is the advice you give to those people that say like, well, I'm just not naturally like that?
That's actually one of the reasons that I wrote the book. And one, I wanted to explain why it was important. I wanted to share what these behaviors and attributes are that differentiate somebody as a connector. But I also want people to know that anyone can access, and it is not nature over nurture. Anybody can develop these mindsets and infuse these actions into their interactions and reap the same reward. So it is completely accessible. And so as we think about non-connector to connector, it is not a black or white. It's not an either or. That's why I created a spectrum. And for us to understand, there's very few people that are truly non-connectors. If you think about it, there's very few people that truly don't believe in the value of relationships, are maybe antisocial, you know, hermits. You know, there's very few people that really are non-connectors.
Right.
At a minimum, people are typically at least an emerging connector. And it's actually where my husband was when I met him in his, you know, mid-20s, you know, and men don't develop as quickly as women. So, you know, he was emerging, meaning that he knew the value, but he didn't quite understand his value in a relationship. He didn't initiate reach out. He didn't initiate adding value. He was maybe uncomfortable in a lot of those situations, but it didn't mean that he didn't do any of it.
Right. Right. And you write about that. There's 7 different kinds of connectors, really. And I guess it also sounds like people can morph or dance between certain types of connectors depending on the situation. Is that accurate?
I would say it's not about the situation. It's about our level, right?
Okay.
So it's not it's more of a level of connector, and you can continue to level up. So, you know, at the most basic level, you're a emerging connector. And then you become a responsive connector. And a responsive connector is infusing more of the mindsets, but they're still a bit more in the responsive mode. They're if somebody asks them for something, they'll be happy to do it. If somebody reaches out to them, they're very responsive, but they're not yet doing that initiation themselves and doing that reach out themselves quite as much. And so we're still kind of working our way up the spectrum. Once we start to pull that first lever, the first differentiator is responsiveness or initiation. As we start to initiate more, we become an acting connector. As we start to realize, oh, I could be valuable. I could do this for you. Or I know this person you might want to know. Or, hey, have you thought, and all of that stuff.
A person who connects the dots for people.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. When you start to connect the dots and offer it rather than just respond to it, you are now an acting connector. And for some people, that's as far as you need to get. And that's as far as they want to get. And that's fine. You're there, you're doing it, you're good. And there's, even within being an acting connector, you can be somebody really acting versus somebody who's like, okay, I got this.
Right.
The other lever that we pull is breadth and depth. So the breadth of our connections and the depth of our connections. When you have a depth in a certain geographic region, in a certain industry, in a certain function, then you become a niche connector. And I use my sister as like the epitome of a niche connector.
That story in the book was great.
I mean, like my sister, if you are in real estate foreclosure in New Jersey, you know my sister's name.
Right.
And you want to know her name. She knows every lawyer. She knows every sheriff's officer. She knows every investor. She knows them all. And she understands that market better. She is a go-to resource. She even has politicians coming to her to talk.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful.
They're like, can you give me some notes on this? She responds to legislation and helps them understand the impact of the legislation. She is a niche connector in that field.
So what's interesting about that is that almost sounds very akin to if you have a thought leadership brand around a specific topic. It's almost like for these niche connectors, that's their thought leadership brand, is that they know that industry or that niche or that subject area really, really well because they know all the right people.
But there's a difference between a thought leader who has the knowledge and a connector who has the relationships.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So she can know it all, but she might not be sharing it. She could know it all, but she might not be facilitating it.
Right.
And facilitating the movement within it.
Right.
And she does all of that. So she's a great niche connector. She is a depth. Now, when you continue to have breadth, so what's happening now in her market is there's some national players coming in. And now all of a sudden she knows people in the California market, in the New York market, in the Ohio market, the Pennsylvania. And so she's beginning to get a breadth of connections. Now she's still within this niche industry. So I would still classify her as a niche connector,
right?
But she's broadening.
Right.
And when we do a broader reach, when we have connections across geographic areas, when we have connections across industry, across hierarchy, across function, across all of those things that make us different, demographics and geographics and all those fun things, then you become a super connector. And if you cross your country's borders, then you're a global super connector. And to some extent, you could probably be a global niche connector as well. But
probably, yeah, absolutely.
But those are the two levers that we pull to kind of level up. And what happens is the higher up you become of a connector, the higher level that you are, the more your advantage is, the more results will be faster, the easier they come, and often the better. I mean, I have people all the time saying, I couldn't believe the result I got.
And so it's part of your work help. So if someone's saying, I need help to become a niche connector or a global connector or a super connector, is part of your work helping them do that? And if so, where do they start?
I get the where do they start question all the time. And where do you start? It depends on where you are right now. And where you need to level up. So one of the things I often will do is put out a challenge to the listeners. And I say, pick three. One person that you want to strengthen and deepen a connection with, that you're already connected to. One person you lost touch with that you want to reconnect with. And one person you really want to connect with, but you haven't yet. And pick your three. And you get 1 week to reach out to all three of them in whatever way you see fit. It could be email, could be phone call, it could be snail mail, it could be Skype, it could be text. I don't care. But find a way to do a reach out and make that reach out personal and specific. And it could be, I just did this today. I was on a plane last November and I was sitting next to a man. And he was at the same conference I was in, but I hadn't met him there. And so we ended up meeting literally on the airplane and chatting the whole way. And he just keeps popping into my head, but I couldn't remember his name for the life of me. And so I reached out to the other person who was on the airplane with us and said, he was tall and he wore a hat and he talks about this. And I got the name, I got his email. I reached out to him and I said, hey, been thinking about you, just wanted to check in and see what was going on. He already emailed me back.
Right.
Now, there's nothing really else to say in that conversation, but it just kept us connected a little bit more. And sometimes that's enough because what we're doing is we're saying, you are important enough to me to take some time to say, I'm thinking about you. And sometimes that's all somebody needs to say that connection is still alive.
Right. I have a friend who always says, even if you don't have any time to connect, if I see that you've liked a post of mine on Facebook, I know you're thinking of me.
Yeah.
And I always carry that because to me that seems like, oh, that's kind of cursory, but I look at that in a new way now where it's like, okay, clearly someone's taking an action, whether it's to like your post or comment on it or whatever, even if you haven't seen that person in years, for that second that it took them to take that action, you were on their mind. And so I love that that idea of using social media to keep those connections alive, even if it might seem like a shallow thing that you're doing, like, oh, I really should pick up the phone and call her. I really should, send her an email. Like for her, she's like, I just know you're thinking of me. When you like my post, I know you know what's going on in my life. You've seen a picture of it and you're liking it. And that helps me stay connected to you.
This is what I call a light touch.
Mm-hmm.
A light touch is when we reach out to somebody without an expectation of any response.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that happy birthday that you post on Facebook.
Right.
It could be that congratulations on your job. So happy for you. Not inviting a conversation back, not asking for anything back, but just saying, hi, here's my name. Here's how I'm staying in your mind without getting in your face.
Right.
And these are
stay on your mind, not stay in your face. Right.
Yeah. So there are people on social media that I've never met.
Mm-hmm.
And that I never even was personally connected to like we are. But yet I know their name because they're very frequent commenters or likes. And I actually reference them in the book. Mm-hmm. Sean and Darlene, I have to go tell them that they're referenced in the book because they were so active that I feel like I know them. I feel like they have earned the right, so to speak, if that's even the right word for it, to reach out to me and to feel that we're more connected, even though we've never spoken.
Right. I love that. So you talk about, you not only talk about 7 types of connectors, you talk about, obviously the book is about 7 mindsets of connectors. And to me, when I was reading it, it was almost like a playbook. Like these are practices or things you can do to hone that connector skill. And one of the ones you talk about is about being conscientious, which is a big one I know, especially for busy, successful people. This fact that being conscientious doesn't mean you say yes to everything. I think that's the other fear that people have of wanting to make connections is, oh, all these people are going to want something of my time or my energy. And so I don't want to reach out to them, which it's nice and Pollyanna to think that everybody's going to want something from you right now, but chances are they probably won't. So how do you tell people to balance that thing of being there and being a connector and reaching out with also setting your boundaries and being able to say no when you need to?
So this is there's 2 key mindsets that I think are really important from the perspective of the connector. Mm-hmm. One is to have a clear vision, know what you want, and be willing to ask for it. And the other is to be conscientious, because a connector follows up and they follow through and they do what they say they're going to do. And so they have to be very clear on what they're willing to say yes to, and being okay saying no. I had for like a year, my husband wrote on one of these little sticky things, no. And he stuck it on the corner of my computer, and it lived there literally for a year until the sticky fell off.
Right.
And it was giving myself permission to say no. And there's a couple things that I teach. One, when you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. Mm-hmm. Because time is a limited resource. Mm-hmm. And when we think about how we want to allocate our time, a trap that connectors can fall into is saying yes to everything. Mm-hmm. And then to the detriment of themselves or their family, not having enough time.
Right.
So understanding, what you want to say yes to. And for me, I created a decision tree. And this is not something I put in the book, but the idea of how do you make decisions about what to say yes to and what to say no to? Mm-hmm. And my decision tree changes over time. When I started my business, before I had kids, I was thinking about, was it easy? Did it make me a lot of money? Did I have fun doing it? Like those are my criteria.
Right.
My criteria are different now. Now is it related to my core message, my mission? Is it an important relationship to me? Or is there some other reason to say yes? Mm-hmm. And that's a bit of a catch-all. But sometimes but I really care about this organization and their mission, and I just want to say yes. So I get to,
Right.
But that's the decision criteria. But I teach that yes isn't just yes and no isn't just no.
Right.
So say yes if, and say yes after, and say yes when, and say yes with. To give yourself the ability to say, yes, I'm happy to chat with you, after lunch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it's like, yes, if you can wait a few weeks. Mm-hmm. And it just gives you breathing room rather than trying to squeeze everything in.
Right.
And when you say no, if you're not comfortable with the no, one of the things that I do, because no is hard, right? Mm-hmm. We don't feel good about it. And when we say no, when somebody says no to us, we then have an avoidance, and that kind of like, so to avoid that, I usually give somebody a way to get a yes down the road. So for example, people ask us to speak pro bono all the time, and we all do it, but we can't do it all the time because we got kids to put through college.
Right.
I mean, it might be little now, but mine are actually taller than me now. So
right.
They're getting bigger.
But it's true. Like the bills need to be paid. Like, yeah.
And so I created what I call my pro bono schedule, and I have so many slots, and I have criteria of even getting a slot. So you have to have a certain number of people. It has to be local. Like certain things that would qualify you to get onto my pro bono calendar. And that makes it easier for me to say no. And then I'll say, listen, if you can get this many people, or if you want to do something within this many miles of where I am, we can talk again. And so it keeps the door open.
Right. You're giving them options
to
engage with you. So I love that. So the other big thing about networking and connecting is, it can take a lot of time. So what do you tell people about having that mindset of this is really too time consuming? Like, how do you fit it into your schedule? How do you keep things fresh? And what do you say to people that say, like, I don't have the time to build connections or networking. I'm too busy doing my stuff.
I say me either. Yeah, I get it. I mean, if I could change the camera angle and show you, I think the stack is probably about this high at this point of business cards.
Right.
It's a graveyard of business cards. Yeah, I think it's about a foot high. That I'll never get through all of them. And there's more here. I can see them all over my desk. You can't follow up with everybody, and that's okay. But there's a lot of underutilized time in our day and in our week. And I want you to think about two things. One, the underutilized time. And two, the things you're already doing. So, for example, I go to the gym. A lot of people in my community are potential business this or business that or whatever, or just friends. And I'll say, okay, let's get in the same, because we do like a circuit. I'm like, let's get in the same circuit at the gym. And we'll have a meeting at the gym while we're working out. We'll have sweaty clothes and all. We'll have lunch after. I've had meetings getting manicures. I've had meetings walking dogs. I met somebody at the dog park and hired them. So think about the things that you do already and invite somebody to do them with you.
I love that. That's a really great one. I had a really good friend who has started several companies, and that was always her thing. Was she always wanted to take a walk every day, especially she was in this period of losing weight. And she actually gets her best ideas when she's walking anyway. So her whole thing, it was like, oh, did you get asked by her to go for a walk? Like that was her thing, was she would have these walking meetings with people and she'd still fit it into her day, which was amazing. And, more fun, to be honest. I mean, maybe not for everybody. They might want that alone time, but I love the creativity of finding ways to fit it in. And I think even, for me, it's even spending the 10 minutes a day checking my social media accounts and seeing what people are up to and liking or commenting or reaching out.
You find your own way.
The 10 minutes is a good use of 10 minutes every day. Do you know what I mean? And so you just have to be disciplined about it, like anything else.
Yes and no. I agree with you of having a habit if that's what works for you. But I also like the inconsistency of life. Right. So it depends on your personality, if you need that structure or not. And so for me, I know food coma. Right. So
nothing after lunch. Yeah.
That's a great time to do some of that, reach out. Commuting. Great time to get on the phone if you're driving or get on email and social media or things like that if you're on a train or a bus. So it's not that you have to separate this time just for this and block it out, because it doesn't feel important enough. But it is so important to nurture your network. It is so important to value and to keep up with your relationships. And it doesn't have to be at a certain frequency. I have somebody who I've known since I was, I don't know, somewhere in the 80s, somewhere in the I was not yet 10 years old time frame. And I might talk to him once or twice a year, or maybe not even talk, maybe just an email. And that's all I need.
Right.
My mentor, he's a CEO of a company. He's IPO'd 3 companies. He doesn't have time to get on the phone with me once a month.
And just catch up. Yeah.
No. I send him 1 or 2 emails a year.
Right.
And once a year I say, hey, it's been a while. Time for us to get together. And he always makes time.
Mm-hmm.
And we get together.
That's great. That's great. And I love also in the book that you had so many examples of not just how you have personally benefited from nurturing these relationships and connections, but from other people as well. The way that they've gotten new clients, they've secured new jobs, they've been able to like move to new cities, not knowing anyone. And, yeah. And that's, that was me. I've lived in several different cities, and that's always the thing of like, who knows who in that city. And then I've gone to different cities, and then because of those connections that were made by somebody else, now those people are my friends, and now those people are my connections, making other connections. So it's something that you invest in that pays for itself, I feel, in the long haul. What do you think about that, about exponentially expanding that network and having that work for you?
Well, that's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
We're both part of a group of female authors, and I've met, of the 250 people on our list, maybe I've met 10 of them,
right.
In person ever, but it doesn't matter. And so again, we have to find the format. And that's one of the things I talk about in the book in terms of thinking about how to do it is you have to find your own format. Whether you want to join an existing group, start your own, it really isn't one right way to do something. And that's why I always say it's like, okay, if you're not a disciplined person, you're not going to enjoy that structure.
Yeah.
You enjoy the unpredictability of it and doing the different thing every day.
Yeah.
But Friday at 4:00 is like the least productive hour of the work week. So, everybody Friday from 4 to 5 p.m., just, do something like that.
Yeah. Well, and let me be clear. I don't do it every day. I'm not that disciplined, but it's finding those pockets, just like you said. Like if I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Whenever I go anywhere for a meeting, it's at least a half an hour in the car, right? So let me make that call. I'm not going to be on email while I'm driving. So let me make a call and reach out to somebody that I've been wanting to call for a while. And having so many of those, and people actually, I find your connections actually do love it when you just try them. And if they happen to pick up, it's sort of like this, oh yeah, hey, I've got 10 minutes to talk. Like it's this happy little surprise in their day. So
if they actually answer, because if we don't know the number,
actually
we won't answer anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of a bigger, it's a big question, but what's one thing that anyone can do to become a better connector?
I always hate that one thing because
I know, but like of all your gems, if they just tried one thing tomorrow, what would it be?
We already talked about picking your 3 people. I struggle with the one thing because I feel that there is not just one way to approach this.
Right.
And so what I would say is what your one thing can be is your stretch. Think about the thing that is a little harder for you. And there's a book called Eat That Frog. It's a time management book. I forgot who wrote it. But I always think about that phrase. And if this is a concept that's difficult for you, I want you to think about it as your frog. And the frog is the yuckiest thing. And you want to eat that frog early in the morning so that then you're like, oh, I did it.
Right. You're not dreading it all day.
Exactly. So I want you to think about that one thing that you've been putting off, that one person that you've been wanting to, but just are really uncomfortable. Like it just kind of makes you a little queasy inside. Whatever that frog is for you, I want you to do it first thing tomorrow morning.
Okay.
And that's the idea of like, all right, I have a deadline. I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't have to decide about it anymore. That I'm just going to do it.
I love that. And just our last question, because this is actually the chapter I'm in right now, and I'm loving that you included this chapter about being an inclusive connector, because we are living in a time and place where people are paying more attention to inclusivity and how you include others in the conversation and take their point of view. It's why I'm writing my book, The Empathy Edge, because it's about looking at things from someone else's perspective and trying to create an environment for them. So can you talk a little bit about inclusive connecting, why it's so important, and what someone can do to become a more inclusive connector?
I mean, first of all, you're never going to level all the way up without being an inclusive connector, without wanting to connect to people who are not like you. And we don't realize it. And I see to myself as well. We surround ourselves by people like us, right? Whether it's the same education level, the same
our own bubble,
ethnicity, same job. Like we just do it naturally. And to break out of the bubble is what really expands your reach and your knowledge and your thinking. And people who are likable and who are liked are seen as more trustworthy, and their ideas as more credible. But it's also our ideas get morphed. And so when we share our ideas with people who are different from us, they actually increase in their value, because we get that feedback from all these sources. So there's so many benefits. Companies that have a diverse work teams are outperforming those that don't. There's so many benefits to being more broad in your connections.
So is that what you mean by inclusive connector? Is someone who seeks out connections with people who are not like them?
Yes.
And makes them feel part of their circle, part of their network.
Yes. And it's thinking about, so you said, what can somebody do? Here's one thing people can do. Have a host mindset. So whatever situation you're in, whether you're the boss or the host or not, if you have a host mindset in every single room you're in, you will look at that room and you'll think, who might feel uncomfortable? Who looks a little out of place? And go up to them and make them feel welcome. And bring them in and introduce them to people, or just have a conversation.
Right.
That's a host mindset. Looking how I can make other people feel welcome. How can I make other people feel comfortable? And that reach out is the idea of inclusivity.
I love it. I love it. All right, Michelle, show us your book again. It's The Connector's Advantage: 7 Mindsets to Grow Your Influence and Impact. It's available, I would imagine, all the usual suspects online.
All the usual suspects. But if you go to theconnectorsadvantage.com, I have a little BOGO, a little buy one, gift one offer.
Nice.
So if you need an excuse to reach out to somebody, you can gift them a book. There's your excuse. And if you do that, if you have the generous spirit, which is one of the mindsets of a connector, I give you lots of free trainings and chapters of other books and assessments and things. I don't know. There's lots of stuff on there.
Great. I love it. And so is that the main website where folks can connect with you, or should we also give them another one?
Yes. So Michelle with 2 L's, Tillis, Tillis, Lederman, Lederman.com is the best place to find me.
Great.
Connect with me on LinkedIn. Tell me where you found me. You can get to my blog there. There's lots of articles about this. My YouTube channel, my success shorties, there's videos. I have tons of content for free to help people understand the value of this and how to turn, what I talk about is turning managers into leaders, but not just leaders, relationship-driven leaders.
Love it. And we'll put all those links in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today, Michelle. It was super, just lovely to talk to you. And I think this is such valuable advice in a world where we feel like all this technology is making it harder to form connections. I love how you are framing this in a way of, yes, we need to have those personal connections and those in-touch connections, but let's also use the tools we have available to strengthen and deepen those connections as well. So I just think it's such an important topic in today's kind of conflict-driven world. So thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.